So let's kind of shift into what you're doing now. I mean, you've obviously graduated from, you're probably no longer undercover. You're doing a lot of other things on a much grander scale, frankly. And before we get too much into what you're actually doing, what in your currently are the primary drug trafficking threats and the challenges in the Northern California region? Are they unique to Northern California? Are they similar nationwide? What is the problem right now for you?
When you look at the landscape, the biggest threat right now is fentanyl. That is our biggest threat. I mean, we have methamphetamine and cocaine trafficking and other narcotics that are being moved around the nation.
And a lot of it's laced with fentanyl.
A lot of it has fentanyl in it. And so, or it's being sold as something else and it's just fentanyl. And that's what's killing a lot of people. Over 106,000 people dead last year. That is across the nation, one of our number one killers. But not only that, the poisonings that it's causing is causing a number of people to go to the hospital. Reverses of the overdoses from naloxone are, keeping some of those numbers down to what they could be. But, micrograms of fentanyl will kill you. And so you look over in my office area, I'm in the Tenderloin of San Francisco. Talk about not the nicest of neighborhoods, but good, strong community of people who just want to live their lives. But within that, you've got an insane number of drug dealers here. And so we're dealing with over 700, drug dealers. Many of our drug dealers that are in this almost a square mile area are from Honduras, the same Syria Valley in Honduras. All of them came up, the majority of them come up here to sell dope. And they are making, hundreds of millions of dollars across a wide region of this country, selling drugs for the Sinaloa cartel. And so we have Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, that is the CJ&G cartel, and the Sinaloa cartel that have kind of taken over the main distribution of fentanyl in the United States. But I have to back that up a little bit because initially, there were hundreds of labs in China manufacturing fentanyl and shipping it through the mail into the United States. So a portion of that started getting detected through efforts that we did to put task force at airmail facilities to try to interdict that. And within a very short period of time, the chemicals that were being used in those labs in China were then being shipped to Mexico, where now they have the labs in Mexico and all that stuff's coming across the southwest border. And to the tune of, when we first started looking at, and I'll talk a little bit about my current role as a high-intensity drug trafficking area director, a HIDTA director. There's 33 high-intensity drug trafficking areas across the country. And the goal of the HIDTA program, since it was formed in 1988 through the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, really the goal was to do a few things. One was to develop strategies to deal with narcotics trafficking organizations, those drug trafficking organizations. And the other one was to develop intelligence, information sharing capabilities, and really support federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement. And so those task forces around the country is about 23,000 full-time task force officers from federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial agencies. And so those task forces a few years back, about 6 years ago, we're only getting like half a ton of fentanyl. That has exponentially increased to now 14,000 kilograms, almost 14,000 kilograms seized. There's a whole lot more that's getting out on the streets that's not being seized. So we have a huge flurry of that. And that, the kind of the epicenter of that in my area is around my building. And last year, we had 806 people that died, that were basically murdered by drug dealers, poisoning them. And, over 5,000 overdoses. So when you consider a small square mile area with a huge impact like that, it is insane. And then you multiply that by cities across America. So that's our biggest threat, is that fentanyl distribution, those poisonings and overdoses that are happening every day, and then the resources that are required by law enforcement communities to deal with the death and carnage and rehabilitation and people just dropping every day.
So how do you coordinate? I'm going to combine these two questions, Sandy, because how do you coordinate across all of these different law enforcements and agencies. And it seems like because this is sort of nation state sponsored, there's a national security part of this. So that implies that the intelligence might be a larger swath of community that you guys are coordinating. So how coordinated is this whole effort? And how do you guys manage that?
I can tell you, about 12 years ago, we were having conversations. One of my other jobs is providing advice to, and sitting on advisory committees for a number of organizations out there. And I was having this conversation with the director of national intelligence at the time, Jim Clapper. Mm-hmm. And it was myself and Rick Fuentes. And Rick Fuentes was the colonel of the New Jersey State Police. And Rick had actually, and I had been telling the DNI about the horrors we were seeing from the opioid epidemic, or what we were seeing at the early ends of it. And Rick goes, I have more overdoses last year than I have people dying in car crashes. He goes, this is the first time we've ever seen this. And so immediately we turned over to him and said, what are we going to do about this? And we had a leader from DEA in the room. And then he turned over to them and said, all right, what are we going to do about this? And then they looked at me and go, Mike, what are we going to do about this? And so I ultimately go, we need to bring people together, sit in a room, talk about this threat, and start working on a threat assessment. And our first meeting, we had over 100 folks from around the country.
Wow.
And we were noticing all kinds of, strange issues related to opioids. And then not too long after that, we did our first threat assessment on the opioid epidemic. And not long after that, I had the same conversation going, fentanyl is killing people left and right. And certain people in the IC and other folks said, well, it's poisonous. Why would anybody in their right mind think that was a good idea to sell it? They'll kill all their customers.
Wow.
And not too long after that, it blows up. And we are seeing death left and right. And it's because they had more than enough customers and they'll kill everybody. And it's the best high that at the time, any heroin addict had ever seen. Now there's a consequence. People die because of it. But, people who are addicted don't think rationally. And they don't look at the consequence of this will kill you. I'm going to get the best high I can ever get.
Well, and actually, it's also I want to stay away from withdrawal. Somebody who's deep in addiction, it's less about the high than it is avoiding the withdrawal.
Yeah, but we have seen the diminishment of heroin usage because of fentanyl, and you can stay sustained. I hate to say it, off of heroin, methadone, and other things, but the cost is also a thing. The cost got so cheap. We had reports of, at the border, the bulk price going down to 35 cents a pill. And so now at the street level, you're still going to pay $20, but they're making such a profit off of this and such ease of access, especially when it's in pill form. But now we also have it in powder form. So there's such an influx of fentanyl in our nation that it scares the heck out of me every day. We have literally dealers on the street carrying 5 pounds of fentanyl on them.
That's enough to kill a whole city.
It is. If it was dispersed the right way, absolutely. True, it's an inhalation hazard. It's not something that if you touch, it's going to kill you from touching it. But you get that in your nose, and you're going to have some major issues if you don't have naloxone or Narcan handy. So being able to have those handy is critical. And I can tell you, I had some interesting battles with conversations about getting naloxone for law enforcement, where folks are like, well, they'll never use it. Why issue it to them? They'll be wasting it. And then, I had folks that would not allow cops to have it or would not sign off on cops to have it. And that attitude changed pretty quickly as the death numbers started to rise.